Hello there, my name is Margaret Chen. I'm 49 years old, and I live in Portland, Oregon, a green city in the Pacific Northwest. Not long ago, everything in my world turned upside down. It started when my husband David, or Dave as his friends called him, died in a car crash. It happened so fast, like a door slamming shut. The police came to my door on a Tuesday morning to tell me he had been driving home from his fishing spot by the river. That place he went to every single week but never took me along. For 20 years that spot was like a locked box I couldn't open, a secret place that belonged only to him. I can still see myself standing at the door after the officers left, staring at their car as it drove away. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't scream or fall down. I just stood there feeling nothing at all. Dave wasn't warm or kind or close to me. He was a man who liked things his way, who didn't talk much, who made rules I had to follow. Our marriage had turned into something cold and empty over the years. I learned not to ask him things, not to share my thoughts, not to get in his path. Now that he was gone, I couldn't tell if I was sad about losing him or sad about losing myself all those years. I cried at his funeral because that's what people do, but inside I felt something else. It was like being confused and free at the same time. A small voice in my head felt bad for not being more upset, for not missing a man who made me feel like I didn't matter for 2 whole decades. Dave was bossy. He told me what to wear, how to talk, and even when I could see my own mother, he always got to decide everything. I was just there in the background of his perfect life. I never worked at a job. He always said we didn't need my money, that his paycheck was plenty for us both. But that also meant I couldn't do anything on my own, couldn't buy things I wanted, couldn't make my own choices. Every time I wanted to try something new, he would say no with a fake smile that felt mean underneath. I disappeared bit by bit, and now that he was gone, I started to notice a strange sound. In my head. It was quiet. Not his kind of quiet, but mine. The quiet I had been holding inside for so many years. And for the first time ever I felt like that quiet wanted to say something. Dave had a special fishing spot by a river outside Portland. He got the spot from his father who showed it to him when Dave was young. From the very beginning, he told me it was his private place. Every weekend he would pack his gear and leave. He said he needed time alone, that he was catching fish with his buddies, that women didn't belong there. "That spot isn't for you," he would say like it was normal and okay. He never once asked me to come along in more than 20 years together. First it made me angry. Then I just accepted it. I became the wife who stayed home, washed his clothes, and didn't ask questions. If I brought up the fishing spot, he changed the topic. If I said I wanted to see it, he laughed at me. Over time, that place became a picture of everything he kept from me. And without me knowing it, also became the key to finding out who I really was. The day he died, I knew I would go there eventually. Not for him but for myself. 1 week after we buried him, I sat down to look through his stuff. I wanted to clean out closets, throw away old things, and get rid of everything that smelled like control and sadness. In a drawer I found papers about the fishing spot, maps with circles on them, receipts from a bait shop, and a small notebook with dates written inside. Everything still had his name on it, which didn't surprise me one bit. But holding those papers felt like holding proof of my own prison. For the first time I thought seriously about never going there at all. I didn't want to keep anything that reminded me of those lonely weekends, the quiet dinners, or the excuses he always made. That fishing spot meant too much hurt. I planned to throw the papers away and forget about it completely. But before I did that, I felt a strong need to see it with my own 2 eyes. Not because I was nosy but because I needed to close that chapter myself. I didn't know what I would find there, but I knew I was ready to look. I left early on a Saturday morning by myself. I put some water, a snack, a notebook, and an old compass in my backpack. I didn't know exactly where the spot was, but I had the map and I held onto it like it was a ticket to somewhere important. The road to the river was bumpy, with tall trees on both sides and hardly any noise. With every mile my stomach felt tight and strange. When I got there, I parked my car near a wooden fence and turned off the engine. My heart was beating so hard and so fast. There were no other cars around, but something felt wrong. There was a small cabin I didn't know about. The windows had curtains. The grass looked like someone had cut it recently, and there was smoke coming from the chimney. I walked closer slowly, holding my breath. I didn't know if I should knock or just look around. I didn't even know if I was allowed to be there, but something inside me kept pushing me forward. This place didn't belong to Dave anymore. It was a space I could finally see, and I was going to step inside. When I got to the cabin door, I stopped and couldn't move. There were shoes by the entrance, a coat hanging on a hook, and the smell of soup in the air. This didn't look like a place that had been empty or forgotten. It looked like someone lived here, like it was a real home with people in it. The wooden floor was swept clean. There was a small table with flowers in a jar, and a child's drawing was stuck to the wall with tape. All of this made my brain spin. My first thought was that maybe someone broke in and decided to stay, but that didn't make sense. Nothing looked messy or wrong. Instead, everything looked organized, loved, and lived in. I stood there frozen, too scared to move. That's when I heard footsteps inside the cabin and a woman's voice calling out sweetly. "David, is that you?" I couldn't breathe. I couldn't say a word. A voice wasn't looking for me. And suddenly, I knew this cabin wasn't just hiding secrets. This cabin had a family inside. I knocked quietly, even though my heart felt like it would jump out of my chest. Less than 5 seconds passed before the door opened, and a young woman appeared. She looked maybe 30 years old, with a little boy holding her hand. His face was covered in crumbs like he'd just eaten cookies. Her expression changed from happy to confused when she saw me standing there. Her eyes looked at my face, my clothes, my hands, trying to figure out why I was there. Before she could speak, she asked carefully, "Can I help you?" In that second, I understood that what I was about to say would break something. I told her my name, and then I said clearly but gently, "I'm Dave's wife." Her eyes got really big and her face went pale. She took a step back and opened the door wider, still staring at me hard. She waved her hand for me to come inside without saying anything. The inside of the cabin was even cozier than it looked from outside. It felt like a home full of love, comfort, and daily life, and I walked through it like a ghost. I sat down on a soft chair while she sat across from me on the couch, still looking shocked. The woman, who said her name was Rachel Park, couldn't stop staring at me with worry and fear in her eyes. Her hands shook a little as she held them together in her lap, like she was trying to protect herself from something scary. When I told her that Dave had died last week, she covered her face and tears started running down her cheeks. She said she thought he was away at a work conference and that he was supposed to come back tomorrow. Nobody had called her. Nobody had said anything. For her, he was still alive somewhere. She started crying without making much noise, looking down at the floor. I gave her a tissue from my pocket, and after a few quiet minutes, she began to talk. She said she had been with Dave for almost 5 years. He told her he was divorced, that he traveled for his job all the time, which was why he could only visit on weekends. He had been sweet to her and made her feel safe and special. I listened without saying anything, without showing how I felt. Every word she said hit me like a punch. Another life, another woman, another home. And me, the invisible wife, didn't know what to say to her. I didn't want to yell at her or blame her because her pain was real and honest and just like mine. She had been lied to too, felt betrayed too, and was completely destroyed. She looked into my eyes and said, almost whispering, "I didn't know he was married. I never would have done this if I knew." And I believed her because her voice didn't sound fake, only heartbroken. She then stood up, walked to a shelf, and came back with a shoebox covered in stickers. She gave it to me without talking. Inside were pictures of them at a fair, at the beach, and right here in this cabin, hugging each other, smiling wide, looking like a perfect couple. I also found birthday cards he wrote to her, little notes on paper, and small presents like keychains and bracelets. All of this proved a story I never knew existed. I felt my throat get tight, but I didn't cry. I was too shocked to do anything. What I knew for sure was that this day would change my life forever because everything I thought was true wasn't true at all. Rachel told me she met Dave at a farmer's market where she was selling homemade jam, and he stopped by her booth on a sunny morning. She said he was funny, that he kept coming back every week, and that after a while he started asking her out. According to her, he was a gentleman, polite, even romantic. He talked about his job selling medical equipment, his travel schedule, and how hard it was to have a relationship when he was gone so much. He never said he was married. He never said he had another life back in the city. As Rachel spoke, I felt like something was cracking inside me. Every detail, every lie Dave had told so easily felt like a slap I couldn't see. She told me that at first they only saw each other sometimes, just a few weekends here and there, but eventually he said they should be together officially. They fixed up the cabin together, bought a bed, hung up pictures, and talked about their future. He promised her a real family, a good life, safety, and she believed him just like I had many years ago. The same words, the same hope, two women, one lie that lasted for years. Rachel picked up a wooden box from a shelf and showed it to me slowly. Inside were drawings the little boy had made, a toy car Dave gave him, and a birthday card that said, "To my son." She said they made a birthday cake together just last month at this very table. He had been so happy and proud. He talked about the boy like he was the most important thing in the world. He promised to take him camping, teach him to fish, and be there for every birthday. It all sounded so real, so solid that it made me cold inside. He had done this before with me. I looked at her and saw myself from long ago, also believing his promises, not knowing that the same man who promised me everything was building lies behind my back. Rachel was broken, but she didn't understand the full truth yet. She still needed to see that her story wasn't real either, that he just told the same lies to different women. I didn't say anything. I just pressed my lips tight, looked at my hands, and swallowed hard because deep down I also felt guilty for not noticing, for being quiet for so long, for not leaving sooner. Rachel turned on her phone and showed me text messages from Dave. They were sweet and loving, talking about what they'd do when he got back and how much he missed them. The last message was only 2 days before he died. "Can't wait to see you both," it said with a little heart. She cried as she read it out loud, as if she still hoped for some answer, some reason that would make this nightmare make sense. I let her cry. I had no words to make her feel better. She then showed me more notes he wrote by hand, ticket stubs from a movie, and a small photo album with pictures of the three of them. Everything Dave had refused to give me in recent years. He had built with her. I even found a letter he didn't finish where he wrote that his life felt complete because of her and the boy. I felt angry and empty at the same time. I didn't know if I should cry or scream, but I didn't do either. I just sat there looking at pieces of a secret story while everything inside me fell apart slowly. I stayed quiet while Rachel cried in front of me, holding that phone like it could bring him back. I didn't know how to make her feel better. I had also spent nights crying over the same man, but for different reasons. What hurt me most wasn't that he lied, but that I had lived so many years next to someone who never showed me his real self. I felt like my life had been a play where I only did what he told me to do. And now I was finding out that I wasn't even the only actor in that show. We were two women fooled by the same man. I didn't cry one single tear in that moment. Felt hollow, like there was nothing left inside me that could break anymore. I had cried so much in secret during our marriage that now I was just numb. Hearing Rachel sweetly remember her times with Dave tore me up inside, because many of those words sounded familiar. I had heard them too long ago, in that same loving voice. It was like watching my past happen again in front of me. 2 stories written with the same pen of lies. When she finally calmed down, she looked at me with wet eyes and said, "I didn't know he was married. I promise if I had known, I never would have been with him." Her voice shook, but what I saw on her face wasn't guilt. It was shock and pain. She was a victim too, just from a different side. She said sorry to me as if not knowing had been a crime. I nodded quietly. There was nothing to forgive. Neither she nor I were guilty of anything. The only person who made this mess was Dave. Rachel kept saying the same thing over and over. I didn't know. I didn't know. I felt like giving her a hug even though so many mixed-up feelings still stood between us. I didn't hate her. Actually, I understood her more than I wanted to admit. We had more in common than I ever could have imagined. We had both loved the same man, thinking he was ours alone, not knowing we were both living his lies. It was a bitter feeling but also strangely freeing because for the first time, I didn't feel alone in my pain. We spent hours talking in normal voices, not cutting each other off, just letting the words come out when they were ready. We listened to each other like we had needed each other for years without knowing it. Neither of us was trying to blame the other, only looking for answers, for pieces of truth that could help us understand the lie. Rachel told me about her worries, about how she didn't know what to do now that everything had fallen apart. I told her about my years of staying silent, about feeling like I never really lived my own life. It was a painful talk, but we needed it. When I got up to leave, she walked me to the door. We looked at each other without speaking for a few seconds, and without planning it, we hugged. It was awkward and quick, but it was real. Two women broken by the same man finding comfort in a shared truth. I got into my car with my chest feeling tight and my head full of thoughts. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I was clear about one thing. I didn't want to drag around the weight of a life that had been forced on me anymore. It was time to write my own story. During the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about Rachel. Her sad face, her small frame protecting that little boy who didn't understand what had happened. She was alone with a child, without much money, with no family living nearby. I didn't know much about her life, but something inside me felt heavy and strong. I couldn't just turn away and pretend she didn't exist. Dave was the one who created this mess, not her. And even though it hurt, I felt responsible, not to him but to her and that little boy. I barely slept that night. I got up many times, looked at the ceiling and went through old photo albums, looking for something that would give me peace. I didn't find it. What I did find was a new way of seeing things. I couldn't just sit there while another woman suffered because of a lie she didn't start. I felt that somehow helping her was also starting to help myself. No longer as a betrayed wife, but as a free woman who could make her own choices for the first time without fear or needing permission. I was finally starting to hear my own voice. Next weekend I packed some bags with toys I still had from my nephew, some food like bread and fruit, and a couple of books I thought she might enjoy. I didn't know if Rachel would let me in or if she would understand what I was trying to do, but something pushed me to go back. I wanted her to know she wasn't alone, that not everyone in her life would abandon her. Arriving at the cabin, I got out of the car slowly and knocked on the door, not knowing what would happen. Took her a few seconds to answer. When she saw me, her eyes went wide with surprise, like she couldn't believe I was really there. I smiled calmly and showed her the bags. I didn't say anything. She didn't either. We looked at each other quietly until she stepped aside to let me in. She took the bags with a mix of confusion and thankfulness. The cabin was tidier than last time, but her eyes still looked lost. I put the bags on the counter and told her she didn't have to decide anything today. I just came to be here and I stayed for hours. During lunch we didn't talk much, but the feeling was different. There was something softer between us, less heavy. She asked me about my life, what my marriage had been like, and I answered honestly. I told her how I learned to stay quiet to keep peace, how loneliness had been my everyday friend. Rachel listened carefully with that understanding that only comes from someone who has felt the same thing. I asked her if she had thought about what she would do after the boy got older. She looked down, shook her head, and said she didn't have the energy to think that far ahead. That's when I suggested helping her find a small apartment in Portland near where I lived. I told her it wasn't something she had to accept, that I didn't expect anything back, and that I was doing it because I understood her fear and confusion. At first, she didn't know what to say. She stared at me with big eyes, like I was speaking a language from another planet. Then she asked quietly, "Why would you do that for me?" I answered honestly, Because you're not to blame. Because I was where you are now. And because nobody helped me when I needed it most. 1 week later, I found a small but nice apartment in a quiet part of Portland. It wasn't fancy, but it had everything needed. A sunny bedroom, a working kitchen, and a clean bathroom. I bought just the basics, always thinking about Rachel and the boy. I got some light curtains, a soft mat, and left a small bed in the corner with blankets, pillows, and a stuffed bear that made me think of new beginnings. When I called to tell her the apartment was ready, she didn't speak for several seconds. Then, her voice breaking, she said, "I don't know how to thank you." I helped her move using my car. It was a short drive but full of emotion. She looked out the window quietly, holding a backpack like it was the only thing she owned in the world. When we arrived, she opened the apartment door and walked through the rooms without talking. After a few minutes, she turned to me with tears running down her face and hugged me tight. It was a real hug, one that didn't need words. In that moment, I understood that without planning it, we were starting something new. Not a friendship we were forced into, but an honest connection between two hurt women who had decided not to stay silent anymore. It didn't take long for the first mean comment to arrive. It came from Linda, Dave's mother, who called me one evening just to say she was disappointed in me. "You're ruining your husband's memory," she said in a cold voice, like I was doing something terrible. She talked about family honor, about what the neighbors would say, about how wrong it was to help the other woman. I wasn't shocked. Linda always cared more about how things looked than about what was true. I replied with a simple, "Do what you need to do," and hung up without feeling bad. This time I wasn't going to explain myself. For years I had stayed quiet to keep everyone happy, to avoid problems, to not upset anyone. But now, I understood that silence had only hurt me. I didn't have to defend my choices to people who never knew what I went through. Rachel was not my enemy, my competition, or my punishment. She was the result of a lie that I had also been part of without knowing. Helping her wasn't meant to make anyone angry. It was a way of breaking the pattern. And if that bothered other people, they could learn to deal with it, just like I had learned to deal with their judgment. After getting Rachel settled in, I made a firm choice to sell the cabin. I never wanted to go there again. That place was full of secrets, lies, and heavy silence. It didn't belong to me emotionally, even if my name was on the papers. I called a real estate agent, gave her the keys, and signed the documents without looking back. It was like closing a door that had been hurting me for years without my knowing it. And by closing it, I felt like I could finally breathe freely. I didn't tell Rachel anything until the sale was done. I didn't want her to think I was doing it because of her or because of what I had found out. I was doing it for me because I needed to let go of that weight. When I told her, she looked at me quietly and said, "You've been braver than you think." I didn't know how to answer, but her words stayed with me. For the first time in forever, I felt neither sad nor angry, just a strange peace, like I had finally gotten back a part of myself that I thought was lost forever. Slowly, Rachel and I started to build a connection that went beyond what brought us together. We didn't talk every single day, but we were there for each other when it mattered most. I went with her to doctor visits, helped her fill out forms for aid programs, and went shopping with her to buy clothes for the boy that a church had donated. She never asked for anything, but accepted my help with that mix of gratitude and embarrassment that I knew so well. Seeing her so young and so broken hurt me, not because I felt sorry for her but because I understood her. I had more years to get. She had not. One day, I found her sitting on the stairs outside her apartment because she had locked her keys inside. I didn't think twice before calling a locksmith and waiting with her. That moment was like a crack that opened between us. And from then on, our relationship stopped being just occasional help and became true companionship. She would tell me her fears, and I understood them without her needing to explain. We started to talk to each other naturally, without being formal, as if life had brought us together somehow, not just through pain but for a second chance. The day the boy got really sick with a high fever, she called me at midnight. He was burning up and she didn't know what to do. I got dressed fast, grabbed some medicine and a cool cloth, and drove to her place with my heart racing. For hours I stayed by her side, helping her keep him cool, giving him water, and calming her when she got scared. I watched her break apart with worry and then pull herself together with strength. And when the boy's fever finally went down in the morning, I felt something I hadn't expected. A deep tenderness, like he was part of my family too. Rachel cried with relief, and I held her close, my heart feeling full. The boy was beautiful, with big curious eyes, like he understood everything happening around him. She asked me to sit with him while she took a shower, and as I did, something inside me let go. He wasn't my grandson or my son, but this child meant something new, something clean. He represented the end of a lie and the beginning of a different story. In that moment, I felt that Dave no longer had any power over me. His biggest gift wasn't the damage he caused. It was the life I helped protect. A few weeks later, I started going to counseling. I didn't do it because I thought something was wrong with me, but because I wanted to understand why I had allowed so much for so many years. Each session was like opening a locked chest inside myself. I found wounds I had thought were normal, surrenders I called maturity, and silence I had mistaken for peace. It wasn't easy to face it all, but I felt I had to if I truly wanted to rebuild myself. For the first time, I didn't want to go back to being the same person. I wanted to be me without hiding, without fear, without guilt. I started writing in a journal things I had never dared to say out loud. I remembered moments I had tried to forget, looks that had hurt me, and words that still felt heavy. I cried some nights, but not from sadness, just from letting go. Healing hurt, but it hurt in a different way. It was a clean pain without blame. The past no longer held me with the same strength. I was learning to release it, not to forget it, but to not let it control me anymore. One day, my counselor told me about a women's support group that met every Tuesday evening at the library downtown. I wasn't sure about going. I felt like I didn't belong, like it wasn't for me. But curiosity won, and I ended up walking into a room full of women of all ages, all with something broken inside. We shared stories, silence, tears, and most importantly, understanding. There, nobody judged, nobody interrupted, and nobody tried to have the worst story. For the first time in ages, I felt like I fit in. I started speaking slowly, in short sentences, carefully choosing every word. At first, I was scared nobody would understand what I had been through. But I quickly learned that many of them had gone through similar or worse things. I wasn't crazy or dramatic or weak. I was just a woman who had survived as best she could in a situation that didn't let her grow. Those evenings became my safe place. I left feeling lighter, stronger, and clearer. And little by little, I started to rebuild myself from a new base. The truth. One evening, after one of those meetings, I sat on a bench outside to eat an apple one had brought from home. I was tired but peaceful, enjoying the quiet. That's when James Liu, a man with a soft voice and calm eyes, who was also leaving the building, came over to me. He asked if he could sit down, and we talked for a while about the weather, music, and how difficult it was to start fresh. He told me he had lost his wife 2 years ago, that he was also in counseling, and that he still had trouble eating meals alone. There was no flirting, just being present. For weeks we met at that same bench. Sometimes we talked, other times we just sat together in silence. He didn't ask for my phone number, make any promises, or try to force himself into my life. It was his gentle way that made me trust him. I wasn't searching for anyone, but I wasn't shutting the door either. Next to him, I didn't feel like I had to explain or defend myself. He listened with respect, without trying to fix me, without judging my past. And for me, that was already real love, the kind that doesn't hurt you. With James, I learned that love doesn't have to be painful to be real, that a soft touch can heal more than 1,000 empty words, and that everyday respect is worth more than big promises. He didn't try to rescue me, replace what I had lost, or take a space that didn't belong to him. He simply stayed, with patience, with gentleness, with that way of being that asks for nothing. He supported me through my doubts and encouraged me to trust without pushing. And slowly I began to open my world to him. Not because I needed to, but because I chose to. There were no fireworks or fancy gestures, but there were looks that said everything. Shared coffees and quiet walks by the river. It was a love that didn't come to fill empty spaces, but to walk beside me. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of losing myself in someone else. I kept going to counseling, kept building myself, but now I did it with company. James reminded me that the past doesn't define what I deserve and that after chaos there can also be calm, a calm that doesn't make you numb but holds you gently. And that was new to me. When James asked me to marry him, he didn't do it on one knee or with fancy words. It was a regular afternoon while we were planting flowers in the garden. He looked at me kindly and said, "We could make this something more official if you want." I didn't answer right away. I just smiled because deep down I already knew. We organized a simple ceremony in a small community garden surrounded by only a few people, but all of them mattered. There was no loud music or expensive clothes, just honesty, yellow flowers, and a quiet promise to care for each other without causing harm. Rachel and her son were there, sitting in the front row as part of my new story. When I saw her, with the child in her lap, I felt the circle complete. This boy, born from a lie, was now growing up surrounded by kindness, respect, and real presence. James shook Rachel's hand at the end of the ceremony and thanked her for being there. I watched him quietly, deeply moved, knowing that not all men were like Dave. That wedding wasn't a perfect ending from a movie. It was a conscious beginning, without ghosts, without masks. Love didn't heal my wounds, but it helped me not to hurt alone, and that was more than enough for me. In time, we had 2 more children, a daughter with a loud laugh and a son who loved drawing pictures. Watching them grow up in a place where love wasn't based on fear was my greatest achievement. I wasn't looking for perfection, just calm, balance, and honesty. Rachel stayed a presence in our lives. She lived just a few streets away, and we saw each other often. Our children played together, growing up like cousins without sharing last names, but with bonds stronger than blood. Longer lived with that constant worry of needing to please everyone or the need to justify every choice I made. I had learned to choose without fear. Sometimes when I saw them running through the kitchen or laughing loudly in the backyard, I thought about everything it had cost me to get here. It wasn't an easy road or a fast one or a painless one, but it was mine. Every step I took, even the shaky ones, moved me further from a life someone else chose for me and closer to a life I had picked. I was no longer the woman who stayed quiet to avoid trouble. Now I was a mother, a partner, a friend, the owner of my own story. And even though I had scars, I wasn't ashamed of them anymore. They were the map of everything I had survived. Sometimes on peaceful nights, I think about Dave, not with anger or longing, but with a cold distance that no longer hurts. He was part of my life, yes, but he doesn't define it. He lied to me. He lied to us. And he left behind a trail of pain that took years to fade. But he also accidentally pushed me toward a freedom I never would have imagined. Forgiving him didn't mean saying what he did was okay. It meant letting go of what I no longer wanted to carry. It was my way of breaking free from that shadow and walking toward my own light. Now I know what it is to live without fear, without pretending, without needing to fit into someone else's plan. My house smells of fresh coffee, open books, and honest laughter. I don't need big things to feel complete, just peace. Stopped looking for approval in other people's eyes because I learned to recognize myself in the mirror. This is me, Margaret, the woman who was invisible for years and now shines without asking permission. And if I've learned anything throughout this journey, it's that living is worth it. Even if it hurts at first, even if it costs you, even if you have to start over from zero. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.